I don't talk about it here very often, but I love horror. Everything from movies like Kronos to The Witch, all the way to Friday the 13th and Halloween. Bro, I even love those stupid Leprechaun movies.
On the man of green, come to do no good. Left in the hood, come to do no good. Left in the hood, come to do no good.
There's something so fascinating about it, and I think it's how different it is from other genres. It's the only one with an active goal to prey on our fears and show us the things we don't want to see. And let me tell you, Terrifier definitely hits both those marks. So for those of you that might not be familiar with the Terrifier movies, I can't necessarily say I blame you. They're super low budget indie movies that had no studio backing whatsoever. Hell, I'm willing to bet that a lot of you that know what Terrifier is probably found out about it when you were scrolling through Netflix and saw the picture of the creepy ass clown on one of the posters. And I know because that's how I found it. So I, like many of you, decided to take a gamble and watch it with the expectation that it would probably be just another scary clown movie. But it was different. What I saw was one of the most strange and grotesque things I had ever seen. And not just in movies. While I might have been pretty confused as to what to think about it, what I did know was that there was something here. It had that it factor that made it stand out to me and kept me thinking about it long after my watch. An entrancing effect that not only caught me, but hundreds of thousands of horror fans. So I wanted to talk about it. Talk about why these movies are so cool, the man behind them, and their success story. And to get things started, I want to talk about Damien Leone.
It's just one of those days when you don't want to wake up. Everybody sucks.
This guy is incredible. In all the interviews I've seen of him, he comes off as a super passionate guy with love for his craft and an honest desire to give people something new and exciting. Hell, he's named after the kid from The Omen, so it'd be kind of weird if he wasn't a horror guy. His story began when he discovered a documentary called Scream Greats while watching Friday the 13th Part 6. A documentary that covered the work of the legendary horror special effects makeup artist, Tom Savini.
And it was the first time I saw in that coming attraction the guy who made some of my monster heroes. I saw him with the puppet from Friday, the Jason replica from Friday the 13th Part 4, and I saw him with the fluffy monster puppet from the Crate episode of Creepshow, and I'm like, oh my god, like this is a guy, this was like a big light bulb moment for me. This is a guy who makes these, and it's artistry.
An artist he would actually get to meet years later at a horror convention, where he also ended up getting his first makeup kit. And this would be the spark that would ignite Leone's passion for horror. Not long after, he would make his first short titled The Ninth Circle. Trying to find a way to stand out from the crowd, Leone decided that his mission statement with his movies would be to push the limits of what could be shown on screen, to show what other films would shy away from in their full glory. And the only problem with that is there are not a ton of studios out there that are too interested in funding something that extreme. So Leone did what any good filmmaker would do and max out his mom's credit card to get his production up and running. Even though The Ninth Circle had some pretty impressive makeup and effects with the demons and the like, especially for a debut, there was one thing that everybody told Leone they were captivated by: the strange and chilling clown by the name of Art. While fairly different from the character we know today, this would be the blueprint that ushered the way for him to explode in popularity as much as he has. One of Leone's goals with Art was to try and make a killer clown that was as far away from the ones people most associated with. Specifically, he needed to make sure Art was absolutely nothing like Pennywise from It. So instead of giving him this exuberant charisma, he was silent. Instead of making him bright and colorful, he was black and white. And something about this character just worked. There was this air of menace that surrounded him, yet a desire to want to know more about this character. And so, Leone would do exactly that. Art would then appear again in Leone's short film Terrifier in 2011. The short was uploaded to YouTube and got a good amount of attention on him. For all intents and purposes, it was legitimately kind of horrifying, and stood out at the time for being so intense and graphic. This outing would cause Art to appear again in the 2013 anthology film All Hallows Eve. And I really want to throw this in here because it's incredibly impressive every time I think about it. But Leone was the director, writer, producer, and editor for many of these movies. And as somebody who can say they have very light experience in the field of film,
What are you talking about, Brittany?
my god, it is not easy to wear that many hats. In 2015, Leone launched an Indiegogo for a new film he wanted to make that would fully flesh out this character he had been building and set him as a new staple of modern horror slashers. As Leone would put into his Indiegogo, his intention originally was to make a Terrifier short, submit it to film festivals, put it up on YouTube, and hope that a producer would see it and, I quote, write him a big fat check to make a full-length Terrifier feature. And while a producer would find him, what would happen instead was the creation of All Hallows Eve, a film that was initially meant to feature several different directors, but Leone would end up helming entirely. He would admit that while he appreciates the movie for bringing more attention to Art the Clown, he didn't feel like it did the character justice. That the character was restricted in doing all the crazy things he should be doing. He wanted to use this campaign for the Terrifier movie, and this is when producer Phil Falcone would take notice and allow Leone's dream to be realized. The film would be made off of a budget of approximately $50,000, which is crazy considering that the Indiegogo campaign had a goal of $15,000. This would allow the film to breathe a lot more than anything Leone had made before and push the boundaries of horror just like he had always wanted. One of the most important additions is the casting of David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown. He just brings something extra to the table that really sells me on his performance, alongside the unspoken charisma he just oozes from beginning to end. He absolutely kills it in his role as the killer clown and really deserves all the praise he gets for making this villain as compelling as he is without so much as saying a single word. The special effects especially stood out as some of the most intense ever put to screen, with the now infamous hacksaw scene probably being the thing that most stood out from the movie and really put it on the map. One thing I especially love about this movie is how filthy the film looks. It somehow feels like Leone coated this movie in a thick layer of grease. That really adds something to me. It's almost the same as how VHS quality horror movies have this added effect, making it just a bit more unsettling. I just imagine a world where this movie looks clean and it doesn't work nearly as well. Frankly, the more it feels like I'm gonna get tetanus from it, the better. And so, it became something of a cult classic. It was a new kind of slasher movie that really stood out among the rest and cemented its name in horror history. Although, not without its fair share of controversy. The film is pretty different in the way it's presented. Instead of following a traditional slasher formula, the film is a lot less predictable and breaks a lot of slasher conventions. Something that split many people into either feeling that these breaks took away from the genre, or those that felt that these changes actually helped innovate the genre. And considering I'm making this video, I'm sure you know what camp I fall into. Probably my favorite controversy that followed this movie was Art using a gun. Now, a lot of people feel like this was a cheap way to get a kill and that guns don't make for good slasher movie weapons, and I get it. But at the same time, that's kind of the point. Art's whole MO is that he doesn't play by the books. He's not just looking to mindlessly kill. What works about him and makes him so intimidating is that he enjoys what he's doing. He actually takes joy in tormenting his victims in the silliest of goofy ways. And once you ruin that fun, well... Leone also talks about this controversy by saying that he thought to do this because he wanted to make Art unpredictable and give the film a sense of being untrustable. He wanted him to be cheap, play dirty, and find whatever underhanded means to emerge victorious. So if he felt angry and annoyed that he decided to pull out a gun just as he was about to be defeated, that was by design. And it was small things like that that really added up to give Art an edge to stand out and have people wanting to see more of his character. And not to mention, see how a series like this could grow with a more structured slasher storyline. That's f***ing alliteration. Could grow with a more structured slasher storyline and fleshed out characters. And so, Terrifier 2 would slowly start to become realized. The script was taken to a company that was willing to put out some money for it, but wanted Leone to cut the movie down, film it in 20 days, and also hand over the rights to Art the Clown. Being understandably not super interested in that, he decided against it. But since Leone already had a completed script, they decided they'd go independent again. Although this time, he already had received a fair amount of funding to make this movie, but he still needed a little extra to push the film further. So just like the first movie, he would end up making another Indiegogo campaign with a goal of $50,000. The main goal being to fund what would become Sienna's test scene. What was really cool about this campaign was that a select few contributors were included in this scene where they'd all be mowed down by Art with a Tommy gun. Which I can't help but feel is Leone being a little cheeky with the critics of the first Terrifier. And I love that. Before Phil Falcone decided to fund the first film, it's like 7 Fs. Before Phil Falcone decided to fund the first film, the Indiegogo campaign for that movie was sitting a little under $4,500 on a goal of $15,000. Approximately 29% of said goal. What happened this time around though was really amazing. Fans across the world crushed it and generated over double the goal on the first day alone, with the grand total secured being $215,000, which just so happens to be 430% of what they were asking for. It was clear that people were extremely excited about this movie and wanted to see what Leone could deliver without the constraint of a shoestring budget. And deliver he did. Thanks to the big funny of 2020, Terrifier 2 spent a pretty long time in production. In one interview, Leone said he expected an October 2020 release date. Unfortunately, that interview was released in February of 2020. So, that's funny. And then there came other trouble since Leone felt he couldn't tackle all these special effects alone and decided to get help from a makeup team. But they decided to back out thanks to the budget. This would lead to a start-stop type of production, where Leone would shoot until the special effects were needed, stop, and then spent the next week or so making everything he needed to make the scene work. Needless to say, there was a ton of work done for this movie, and mainly from a core group of around 9 people. While definitely not everybody involved in the process, I've really got to shout out people like Jackie Hughes and Olga Turka for helping bring this vision to life, especially whoever designed Sienna's costume. And after a long, long wait, it was finally here. And just like the first film, Terrifier 2 delivered on being one of the goriest, craziest, and most fun horror movies in recent memory. And if you've been around my Twitter, you already know I have a lot of love for this movie. It took a lot of elements that I think the first film did really well and elevated them even higher. It was given structure and story in a way that the first one didn't have. Not to mention having much stronger characters. Art in particular really gets some time to shine and is really able to show off his sick, sadistic nature. Absolutely every kill in this movie goes insanely hard. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention before is that all of these kills were made practically, meaning that they were painstakingly crafted and designed to look as gruesome and grotesque as they do. I especially have to praise a particular scene in the movie that somehow managed to rival the hacksaw scene in the original. I didn't think it was possible to rival it, but my lord Damien, buddy, you most certainly did. That said, there was no louder gasp in my crowd than when Art repeatedly stabbed a man in a particular part of the male anatomy and left every man wincing in his seat. And then you factor in this movie's super low budget, and it only becomes even more impressive. And damn it, Art's also just hilarious. I mean, what other character in horror reads the news of a tragedy and laughs hysterically? Legitimately, Art got more laughs from my audience I went to see it with than the most recent comic book movies I saw. I already gave some strong praise to David Howard Thornton here, but I cannot emphasize enough just how much he sells this character. It takes a lot of commitment to make a character like this work, and you can tell that he is so invested in doing just that. He's gone on to state that a lot of his inspiration comes from people like Doug Jones, Rowan Atkinson, and Stefan Karl.
He's kind of a big...
And the idea that Art the Clown is essentially the love child of Robbie Rotten and Mr. Bean only makes me like him even more. Plus, from everything I've seen of him, the man himself also seems like a super swell guy.
So just while we're waiting for that, you guys just premiered at Fright Fest in the UK, right?
We did. Unfortunately,
Very cool.
we didn't get to go there, but...
That's what killed the Queen.
Oh my God.
Ooh. Wow, you heard it here, folks.
But of course, I can't talk about Art without also talking about Sienna. One of Leone's goals with this movie was to try and design a protagonist to be the rival to Art and give him something to fight against in this story. Think what Nancy is to Freddy Krueger. And Sienna does a really great job in fulfilling that role. Having a character that feels like the final girl of older slashers is nice, but she manages to go beyond that. She feels like the kind of character you want to root for in this movie and are excited to learn more about. It's also cool to see somebody so tenacious when it comes to protecting her brother. It probably helps that the actress for her, Lauren Lavera, could probably kick my head off if she really wanted to.
What the fuck?
And while I'm on the subject, massive props to her too. Not only does she do a great job in her performance as Sienna, but she also seemingly did a ton to help behind the scenes. This was not an easy shoot to go through, and she still managed to deliver in such an impressive way, also being the glue that held the production together through some of the most difficult days of shooting. And when you see some of the places that this movie was shot, you can tell that it wasn't easy. But even still, they managed to pull something together here that I find myself wanting to watch again pretty regularly. I also just love that a school let them film there because they assumed they were shooting a family film, which I guess is true in the fact that there is a family in this film. Watching this movie reminded me of watching one of its biggest inspirations, Nightmare on Elm Street 3. And I feel like as one of my favorite slasher movies of all time, it's harder to give higher praise than that. However, while the inspiration is there, it still feels so fresh and original that it has no problem standing on its own. It's a slasher movie through and through. Still, it takes that genre and elevates it into something more modernized and exciting by not sticking to those same conventions we've seen for over a decade. For a while there, it felt like the slasher genre was dead, if not dying. And it's the first time in a long time I feel like I've seen people be excited to see one again. Some articles are calling this movie the inventor of the mega slasher, and I can't really disagree with that because this movie is truly one of a kind. Leone stated in his director's commentary that he came up with the name Terrifier because he wanted the film to feel like the amusement park ride of horror movies. And that's pretty much exactly what this movie feels like. You can really feel the love and passion poured into each and every scene the film has to offer. And I think that has a lot to do with why I love this movie as much as I do. It feels like a passion project realized without having to compromise or sacrifice the original vision. And what's even better is that Leone's determination to make this something special actually paid off. Literally. Unlike the first movie, Terrifier 2 would receive a theatrical release thanks to it being picked up by Bloody Disgusting for a 1-week release. But then, word of mouth got around. People telling their friends about how crazy this one horror movie was, and that they had to check it out. Next thing you know, there were reports of people being so disturbed that they were vomiting in theaters, and others who walked out because they couldn't watch, leading to the now infamous sick bags being handed out during screenings. And with people hearing all the buzz, the movie ended up staying in theaters for a bit longer, and then a little longer. And before you know it, after an unexpected 3 weeks in theaters, Terrifier 2 would end up making an incredible $13 million. And remember, this movie was made off of $250,000. I rarely see a movie on opening day anymore. I remember being so excited to see this movie that I did exactly that. And I'm happy that I did. What I expected to be a pretty light crowd, as had been the case with most other movies in recent times, turned out to be a packed crowd of people having a lot of fun. It was an experience I wouldn't have traded for any other, even if there was some kid next to me spurting the same 3 memes from his mouth like a broken soundboard. I really want to thank Leone for giving me such a great time, where I can be absorbed into this movie's world, forget about everything else, and just have fun for 2 hours. So, aside from just wanting to talk about it, I really want to try and get as many eyes on it as possible. It's incredible to see something that started so small blossom into something that has an entire community talking about it. So much so that Leone tweeted that he had 2 meetings lined up with Paramount, contact with A24, and a Zoom meeting with director Sam Raimi, which is pretty insane. Plus, Leone apparently already has a treatment for Terrifier 3 done that he's considering splitting into 2 parts. So it's likely that it won't be too long until we see art show up once more. I just find the entirety of Terrifier's story incredibly inspiring. Despite being told that his ideas just wouldn't work, that there was no way that a movie about a killer clown would sell in this day and age, Damien Leone proved them wrong by making one of the most talked about and celebrated horror movies in recent times. In an interview with Halloween Daily News, Leone talks about how many people shy away from taking risks in filmmaking. How many are willing to follow a trend, but nobody is willing to start one.
That's the mindset, because nobody wants to start the trend, they just want to follow. Let's do things that other slashers don't do. Let's completely take him out of his element. Let's take him out of his costume. I mean, we know, at this point I knew Art the Clown worked in that costume because I'd be making so many short films and getting all these compliments about him, and it's like, now you're going to take him out of, like, potentially the only thing that works is like take him out of his costume and whatnot. So I like doing things like that. I like taking risks because, you know, sometimes it's going to fail, but sometimes it'll pay off. But you're going to get something different.
And that brings me to one of the main reasons I wanted to make this video in the first place. When talking about horror movies, many people judge their quality based on things like how scary it was, which is fine, but it's never really been the quality I look for in horror. To me, horror is all about breaking ground and exploring the taboo subjects often neglected by other genres. In other words, I just can't think of anything less interesting than a safe horror movie. In my mind, the goal of any horror movie should be to push those set boundaries. Often, my favorites in the genre are the ones that challenge conventions and standards set by others. It's a genre with no playbook and no rules. One meant to take you out of your comfort zone and explore the unexplored. And that's part of what I think Terrifier 2 does so well. Despite having a fraction of the budget and being made by a self-made filmmaker, it manages to push the slasher genre to its absolute limit and gives you a great time while doing it. So if you haven't already, and you're a diehard horror fan like myself, please consider supporting this film and giving it a watch. Granted, content warning. I might be praising the hell out of these movies, but it might not be such a good idea to play them at your next Bible study. Anyway, it is so rare to see a success story of this magnitude in this day and age, and I'm hoping Leone's success pushes other filmmakers to pursue their dreams, no matter how difficult it may seem. To make their dreams a reality without compromise and provide stories to the world we have yet to see. We did it, Reddit. We did it, Reddit.